Hi, I'm Elaine Evans. I write women's fiction and romance that make you feel. Today, I'm here to talk about my book, Becoming Mallory.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Elaine Evans. We're talking about her beautiful book, Becoming Mallory, but we're also dropping quite a bit deeper, and we're going to get into what it's like to write raw, tender, vulnerable, real-life experiences and taking readers on a journey of growth, healing, maturation, exploration, all leading to a wonderful happily ever after. Make sure to stay until the end of the episode to hear Elaine's love letter that she wrote to her younger self. But as always happens on this podcast, it's probably the love letter that you need to hear as well. So, Elaine, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I am too. I'm thrilled. This is just, I'm nervous, but I'm so excited. It's a nervous excitement at the same time. So, yeah.
You know what? I can relate because I feel a little bit nervous myself because the topic of your book was so big and so important, and I want to give you a great interview and offer a great platform, and I want to speak about it the way I experienced it, right? So I take those things very seriously, but we're just going to do our very best because I know the right people are going to listen and they're going to have compassion for
I hope so.
right, for the emotion that comes up. Well,
Good.
I would love to give you the floor to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit and talk about the book that we're going to focus on today, Becoming Mallory.
Okay. So my name is Elaine Evans. I am a middle-aged author located in Northeast Ohio. And Becoming Mallory is my debut novel. I kind of stumbled back into writing. I used to write when I was a teenager a lot, and then life got in the way and I got away from that. Then it kind of just stumbled back into my life, and I didn't know what I wanted to write about, but a friend helped me along. And I decided to write about my experience, fictionalized, of raising a child with autism. And I wanted the book to be from the whole family's point of view, not just the mother, the daughter, which was the original plan. I wanted it to be from the entire family's point of view, because when you have an individual who's diagnosed with any kind of either mental or physical illness, it affects the entire family. So I wanted to do that. I wanted the whole family's perspective to be shown throughout the book.
Well, we're going to dive in right there because that was one of the things that really stood out to me in your writing. It was very unique in that we were offered everyone's perspective.
Yep.
And why that was so powerful is that it's a reminder that when we go through things, we are not on an island by ourselves. Our decisions, our actions, our feelings do affect the people around us, no matter what anyone says, right? There's almost this like pop psychology, nothing can affect you, nothing can phase you. It's like, no, but we are interdependent, we are connected, we empathize, and that really came across in your book.
Good. I'm so glad for that.
Oh, yeah, and I thought it was such an interesting way to watch someone go through these things and experience the first love, the first heartbreak. So you really invited us in. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because that is such a choice, and you did it with your first book. So
I know.
let's
Breathe.
right, let's start right there with the choice to expand beyond just Mallory and her mother's perspective. You invited everyone in, and it was very intimate storytelling.
And I will start off by saying my original idea was to have just from, the mom's name is Laura, just to have the perspective be from Laura and Mallory. That was my whole, and the book itself is written in two parts. So the first part of the book, as you know, you've read it, is primarily from the parental point of view. And then the second part of the book is kind of from everybody's point of view. So, because she's older and kind of the, in the book as we progress. But so my first idea was part one will be from mom, one will be from Mallory. But then as I started to really write it and I started writing the kind of character voice of Scott, the dad, and a couple scenes of Jake, the brother, and I realized, no, I think it's really important that this point of view of these other two characters who are both male is also very important. So that's why I decided to switch things up. I knew it was going to be a huge challenge. This is my first book, for heaven's sakes. And here I am writing from four different perspectives, which eventually evolves into five, because in part two, we introduce Caleb, who's her first boyfriend. So this is her nucleus, this is her family unit. And anyone that is neurodivergent or particularly autism, you don't branch much outside of your nucleus. It's very much your safe space. So I felt like Mallory's safe space needed to have a voice. That was primarily where I went with it.
All right. Well, we have a lot to unpack, even in what you just said. But let's set the stage a little bit and take a
Oh,
step back. One of the
okay.
reasons that this story really appealed to me, and I shared this with you on the pre production call, is that years ago, a different lifetime ago, I was the director of a nonprofit for children with special needs. And we address not just the child, but the entire family. And that is
Yes.
so much why this book really resonated with me, because one of the things I shared with you was that it was so important to us to offer support, services, and recreation to
Hmm.
the siblings of the children with special needs, to the
Yes.
parents, to offer them support groups, offer them moments and experiences of socialization, because we realized the pressure it places on the entire family. There's life pressure anyway, but
Correct.
then it almost escalates a little bit. And we really see this in your story, in these
Yes.
beautiful moments of
Mhm.
reality and intimacy and the tenderness of just daily life. And so I want to talk about that for a moment, because that is very important for anyone listening to this. That comes up in your book. The
Yes.
main characters, I'm saying main characters because there's quite a few of them. It's that relationship with Laura and her husband.
Yes.
And that's the foundation for this. And you did not write them as flawless,
No.
perfect characters. So
Nope.
let's drop into that. Why did
Okay.
you intersperse those moments of beautiful tenderness with the reality that people argue and fight and say and do the wrong thing?
Correct. Because that's real life. Because, in our minds, what we want and what we get are two completely different things. So I think anybody that is dealt this hand in life, what you want is for all the cards to fall into place. You want that perfect hand to be dealt you, and you want that pot at the end. You just want it all to just a nice little bow. But that's not the reality. When you are given this diagnosis, I, I kind of like trying to think how I want to word this. Compare it to almost like grief, that expectation that you had of them, maybe these lofty dreams of what they would become as an adult, kind of go away because you know that their life's going to be different and there is a grief aspect there. And when you experience grief in real life, you react to it in a way that you don't expect. We may sit back and say things like, oh, if my husband dies, I'll do this, 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 or this. And you don't do this, 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 this. So in this situation, you might think you're going to react a certain way when you get that diagnosis and that life change, and then you don't. And especially with Scott, the dad, I really wanted that to be reflected because he doesn't really react to it in the best way. He's very standoffish, kind of alienates his wife a little bit and wants to fix things and he can't. So I really, really wanted that to be highlighted. And then that, of course, bleeds into those intimate moments with his wife. So they have to take that time to really talk about things privately, not in the presence of their children, and figure things out. And that's when you really have to get personal with each other. And I wanted that on the page. I mean, why shy away from it? That's what happens.
I
You know?
also think it lays a foundation for how the entire family interacts with one another, but also how they interact with the other people in their lives, which we see as the
Mhm.
story progresses.
Correct. Yes.
Because you're talking about a couple that had a strong, intimate foundation. I think my favorite little scene that you gave us before we really dive into the story, was something I completely related to. It was Scott's phone calls home as he's on his way home, and she talks about what she's making for dinner. It was
Yes.
just this little daily thing that personally
Yeah.
I have loved for the last 10 years that happens in my life,
They
but it's this foundation, right?
right.
Of tenderness, of the rhythm of our lives that we've built together. And then it's
Right.
a little contrast with the reality of life in
Mhm.
that your child might have a diagnosis, something might
They
change the
could
path that you're
they
on,
might
right?
see
Like,
something wrong, but they don't know what type
they
of
don't know
situation
what,
it is.
right? It's this almost looming thing that
Correct.
they don't quite know how to name. And that's
Right.
a really important part of the book because that's the reality of someone's
Yes.
experience. And someone could read the book and say, "Why isn't everyone acting perfectly?" And it's like, because
Exactly.
people don't do that in real life. And
Right.
we punish ourselves and we get mad at ourselves, we get mad at our
Yes.
partner, and it's just a process of
Right.
surrender, acceptance. Like, that's what surrender and acceptance looks like. It's a little messy at first, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah,
I
I want to highlight that because you invited us in to
right.
a part of a family dynamic we're usually not invited into.
Yeah, and I really wanted that, especially with Scott and Laura, because like you had said, that dinner scene where she's cooking dinner and he's on his way home and he says to her, "Any walking and talking yet?" So it's like you had said, it's like this dark cloud that's just kind of looming over the household, but yet they're still trying to keep that happy facade up. And you know something's wrong, but you just don't want it to be that one thing. You don't. And I think that's reflected too in Laura's conversation with her mother on the phone, which also is something that kind of mirrored what happened to me in real life. My mom was the one that came to me with the concerns first. And I'm like, you have got to be joking. There is no way that's what's going on here. And I was very dismissive of her in that conversation. And I wanted that in the book. And then, when Scott you had mentioned in your what you had just said, when they finally accept it, I really wanted that moment between Scott and Laura when he's finally on board. He's kind of crying about it, not in a bad way, but he's crying about it because he knows his daughter's life is going to be different. It's going to be challenging, and nobody wants that for their child, regardless of what's going on. And I wanted him to say, my daughter, Mallory, has autism. Like he had to verbally say that out loud to make it real for him. And I wanted that reflected because that's so important to be able to say those words out loud. I mean, no matter what those words are for you in your own personal family or relationship, you have to say those words out loud because it just brings it down to kind of like your level. And I thought that was a really important moment. I love that scene when she's in the bathtub and they have that letter finally from the doctor. I think a lot of times with Scott, especially, and just with men in general, you have your wife telling you, I think this is what's going on. You have your maybe mother in law telling you, I think this is what's going on. Even his best friend, Johnny, is like, yeah, I think maybe this could be what's going on. But when you get that outside validation, it's complete, it changed everything for him. So I liked that a lot. And it really was important that he accepted that. And he finally did. And then he becomes her biggest champion, which
Yes.
is my favorite part. Like he's her biggest cheerleader from that point on. So I love that part too.
And the one thing I really want to stress, because it is so important in this conversation, is that this is a story about human beings navigating life and
Mhm.
not doing it perfectly. And
Right.
the beauty and the tenderness in that, because anyone listening could misinterpret what we're talking about right now. I would like to
Okay.
say, from my perspective, that this is something I saw very often with the families that we served at our nonprofit, and they felt very safe with us and would talk to us about this. So it's not that this diagnosis is the worst thing that ever happened. That is not what we are saying, and I wanna make that very
Yes.
clear for anyone
No,
listening, right? So,
absolutely.
yes, and we're gonna talk about that even more because what we're talking about is contempt prior to investigation, not knowing about something,
Right.
only hearing the fear, feeling incapable. So the parents feeling like, "I don't have the skills. I don't know what to do in
Yes.
this moment." And that fear
Right.
coming up, the fear of what is my child's life going to look like, and a little bit, almost in that moment, not realizing that you never know what your child's life is going to
Yeah,
look like.
exactly.
But
You have no
that
idea.
you have no idea, but that
Mhm.
there's this, diagnosis or these definitions that are running through our heads that are escalating this fear that we actually haven't moved through yet. And that once you educate yourself and you surround
Correct.
yourself with a knowledgeable community,
Right.
you have no idea what you're capable of. So I do want to take a moment and address that because I do feel like this can be a really emotional topic. It is
Yeah.
something that we're bombarded with messages on social media. They're not
Right.
always correct. And that you're taking the approach of, I want to show you what happens in someone's home and the experience they go through, and they're still loving, supportive, kind people, and they're still going through this process of
Right.
coming to terms. So that was
Yes,
my
I
little
do.
soapbox.
Oh, that's okay. I'm glad you said that because no,
Yeah,
you're right. It's not the worst diagnosis. And I don't even want to say any diagnosis that you receive physically or mentally is the worst diagnosis in the world. It's
yeah.
just there. It is what it is. And you have to accept it and you have to move on. And autism changed our life, me and my family's life. But I have to say the good far outweighed the bad. Like, like my daughter, Samantha, who, the book is kind of loosely based on, is probably the most compassionate, kind-hearted person you could ever meet in your entire life. And I credit autism for that. She sees things in people, emotions, fears that I think the rest of us are blind to, but she sees it. And yeah, so I mean, it's very hard at first. It's very hard at first. But then as time rolls on, as it always does, you begin to see the benefits. And I hope I reflected that in the book as well, because you do see the benefits of what autism has given her. And kind of other bad things come with it, which I'm sure we'll get into as well,
Yeah.
but you deal with it. So yeah, I mean, and I wanted Mallory to be like that too. I wanted Mallory to be kind-hearted and loving and all the things that my daughter is too because of her autism. It gives her that gift.
Well, another thing that you invite us into is the experience that people can have when they move into acceptance, when they surrender, when they are opening themselves up to this versus the resistance that they could live in for their entire lives, which is also something I witnessed working with these families, these
Yeah.
amazing families I had the opportunity to work with.
Aw.
And I feel like we can't get there unless we first address that initial resistance and the fears and all of those things. So it's very easy to pretend that those things never existed, that we were born with a pamphlet for how
Right.
to navigate this perfectly. But
Right.
instead, you're really dropping us into that raw intimacy, vulnerability of
Right.
saying, doing, feeling the quote unquote wrong thing, and people
Right.
loving us through that and guiding us through that. And at every point throughout the book, someone else is guiding someone else. And there's
Yes.
this beautiful invitation into the brother's perspective
Yeah.
because
I
I
was
feel
hoping you
like
bring that.
right, very very often siblings can feel that they're I don't even want to name all his feelings because it's in the book and you really
Yeah.
invite us into that. So let's touch on that for a moment and the choice to bring us into his perspective, not just as a child, but also as he ages and he's a
Yes.
teenager and he's growing.
So I didn't want a lot of Jake chapters because the book was getting big enough as it is. But I wanted his perspective in part one, where he's younger. He's, I think, 13 years old at that time. And he's noticing that Mallory is getting a heck of a lot of attention from his parents. And he's feeling a tad bit neglected. And it's not that he doesn't love his sister, it's not that he doesn't understand why she needs this attention. But his parents have kind of now dove headfirst into this life of things that she needs to help her, which is great. But what that did is it kind of pushed Jake off to the side a little bit. And he's noticing, he knows that this is what's going on. And so, yeah, that's a pivotal moment in the book between Jake, I think between the whole family, between Jake's relationship with his parents and Jake's relationship with Mallory.
Yeah.
I think it really just was important. And then I wanted his perspective in part 2 to be more of like the acceptance. He is now her, he helps her so much. He's now the big brother. He's now the guy that's going to help her. And he understands he kind of sacrifices a date with his girlfriend to spend the evening with her because she needs the help. But he does it willingly because that's his sister and she needs help. And, I wanted those two perspectives. And, you know, time brings that perspective. Kids get older and, they see things differently. But I really wanted his perspective in the first part of the book to be from that age where things are so confusing and you're getting into those big feelings and you have puberty and stuff. And he just sees that his sister's getting all the attention and he's not. And it's really bugging him. And
Yeah.
so he approaches his parents about it, which is really big of him. And yeah, it's kind of a pivotal moment in the book. I really liked and I really wanted Scott and Laura to
Yeah.
recognize that, okay, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, he's got a point. We can kind of see this. And they take the steps to change it because they realize that we have two kids we have to parent here. We have one that's not neurodivergent and one that is. And we have to figure out how to do it differently, but blend them. And that can be
Yeah.
challenging.
Well, I had a question as I was reading the book, and I kept jotting
Yes.
this note down as I progressed. And I thought it was really brave for you as a writer was that you did not shy away from your characters having flaws. And I say flaws,
Mhm.
meaning just being people. Every
Correct.
single character in this book has those flaws, has those moments of weakness. And as I'm saying the words flaw and weakness, I'm just talking about being human. So
Just
no one in
imperfection. Like,
just
yes,
imperfection, like, and those
correct.
imperfections can bring a lot to our lives. So I'm not saying that these people should have existed without them, but
Right.
I feel like that brings a lo I guess I'm touching on it because I felt like there was almost like maturity in the writing, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. We're both middle-aged, so I'm
I
saying maturity
I
in
mean,
writing. But I felt like you trusted your characters and you trusted
right,
the reader to know that everyone is going to make mistakes and it is not going to change how you feel about these people. I trust you to be on this journey with me. Was
right.
there ever a moment when you wanted to almost polish a character and not do that? Why did you lean into that?
So I would probably say the character of Scott. There's one scene in particular where Laura finally introduces the idea to him. And she introduces the idea to him after they've kind of had an intimate moment themselves. And she introduced probably wasn't the best timing on her part, which was also not a good idea. So she brings this up and he does not react well. Actually, a little bit of anger comes out. And I wrote that chapter and I reread it and I reread it and I read like I was really so afraid, Casey, that they, people would read that and then be like, oh gosh, he's toxic. Red flag. Yeah, it kind of was a red flag at that moment in the book. We all have red flags. We all have red
Yep.
flags that we wave every now and then. That was his. And so I decided to keep it. I still to this day don't know really. I know a couple reviews, people have said it, but that's okay. That's okay. And, I really just wanted that to be reality because, like you said, and after reading this book, if you read this book or any of my other books, All In, His Last Shot, and then The Storm We Breathe, which will be coming out next week, you'll see that I like flawed characters because that is real life. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that reflected in Laura too. She doesn't make some of the best decisions either. She kind of reacts in an odd way in the very beginning with her mother and Jake with how he reacts. And then her later on in the book, her, love interest, which Caleb, I kind of wanted him to be pretty close to perfect because that's what I want for my daughter.
He was pretty much close to perfect, just FYI.
Was. I wanted that. But I mean, Caleb's dad. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna get into that or not. He's a
Yep.
real piece of work. And I didn't want to shy away from that because we sometimes have to deal with some pretty toxic people and pretty close to us toxic people in our life. And I wanted that reflected as well. So, no, my ultimate decision was I can't shy away from this because this is what people deal with every day, all day long, sometimes.
Well, let's stick with that topic for a moment because I will say, as a reader, something that makes me feel safe. right? Like with quotes around that word as I'm reading is when someone is writing a character that feels very true to real life experiences. If you are in a
Right.
long-term relationship with someone, a long-term intimate partnership, I absolutely promise you the one thing you can count on is that they are absolutely going to say the wrong thing
Yes.
at the worst moment possible,
Yes.
and their biggest insecurities will come out and they
Yes.
will
Yes.
only feel safe sharing them with you. And to
Correct.
anyone listening who wants to misinterpret, I'm not talking about abuse. I am absolutely not.
No.
I am
Abs
talking about that horrible thing that they wouldn't share with anyone else that they will say at their most vulnerable moment. And they will want to retract it as soon as it comes out of their mouth and they
Yes.
can't pull it back. And you still have to wake up the next day and figure out how you're going to have a relationship. And so part of why I wanna talk about that is because that's the beauty of long-term relationships, of
Yes.
figuring out how do we grow together? How do we heal together? How do I share my vulnerability, not in a way where I'm lashing out at you all the time? So if throughout your entire book, if Scott had not grown and had not changed,
Yes.
that would
Yes.
be the red flag. But instead, it
Absolutely.
was at this crucial moment when I feel devastated and raw and physically vulnerable, I'm putting my walls up and pushing you away with my words. That felt really true. It feels like something that happens, and then
It
he
is.
evolves. Yes.
Yes. And that's, after that scene, they go to bed that night and he does apologize to her. He's like,
Yes.
"I'm really sorry." Like he knew he had crossed a line with his reaction. And he apologizes to her and they go to bed, but then the next chapter is the next morning and it's still there the next morning.
Yeah.
And even though the anger, has simmered down some and he's still not that on board with it. And that's kind of, what happens. And he pushes her away a little bit silently, silently pushes her away. But like you said, he does eventually tell anyone out there that's curious, he does come around. He really
Yes.
truly does and becomes her biggest champion. But that you're so right, because it wasn't just an apology and now everything's, unicorns and rainbows. No, we still got this situation on our hands the next morning. I still want to get my daughter tested. But what I liked, because in that particular scene, the argument was that she wanted to get Mallory tested and he didn't. That's kind of what caused the argument. But then at the end of the day, he may not have agreed with it, but he did support the decision. He still
Yes.
went with it. He was like, okay, I know this is what you're going to do. So, okay, just do it. And,
Yeah.
thank goodness Laura felt comfortable enough, what had that mama bear in her to proceed, because then their whole life, they got the answers that they needed after that. And that's what Scott needed. He needed to see that. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I like
Yeah.
that part of the book a lot, actually.
Beautiful writing to invite us into that because I
Oh,
think it
yeah.
also invites you into the reality of the experience many people go through where
Right.
they don't get the happy ending. Like in
No.
your book, I'm not giving anything away. There's a
Right.
happily
Yeah.
ever after
Of
for all of these
course.
characters, right?
Yes.
But the
Yes.
reality is that many people have that argument and they never come back together. I
Correct.
thought you were inviting us into this is the messiness of repair,
Right.
of making amends, of saying, maybe I wasn't right about that. And as a family, we're going to survive that sometimes I'm going to make the wrong call and I'm going to adjust my perspective. I
Correct.
love that in writing. So you'll always hear that
Right.
on this podcast that I think that those lessons in these books are the most helpful, where someone can be reactive and say, why wasn't he perfect the exact moment when she is
Yeah.
delivering this information? I don't know that that's the story I would love. I love seeing characters develop and evolve
Yes.
and working through things together, but that's who I am as a reader. So, which is why I loved your book. And then
No.
we cannot ignore that there is a romance happening in this book. Not just
Yes.
the romance with Scott and Laura, like the entire like, hey, as we grow and evolve and raise kids, there's that romance in the background, but Mallory's experience. So I
Yes.
want to drop into why was that important for you to highlight in this story?
Because, like I had said, the book is kind of loosely based on our family's experience. And my daughter has not had a relationship yet. So my hope is always that she finds somebody like Caleb. So I thought, let me write who I would love for her to have. But also what I wanted is because when you get to she meets Caleb right when part 2 starts, because now the family has gotten into a really nice groove. You know, she is now in a school for kids with autism. She's thriving. She has a job. I mean, this is everything Laura and Scott wanted. Everything is just falling into place. We have these dominoes. It's perfection. And then I wanted this little bomb to be dropped in, which is boom, now she's met a boy and she likes this boy. So now we have a whole new set of complicated feelings that we didn't have before that Mallory doesn't really know how to process. And there's no really like manuscript or textbook for something like this. I mean, there probably are out there on the shelves of Barnes and Noble, I'm sure. But, when it comes to love, that's complicated. And you add in the fact that Caleb is not neurodivergent and Mallory is, that just adds in a whole new dynamic. So I really wanted, the reader to come across as now things have settled. This family is happy. They're in a routine. And then this happens. And yeah, but I wanted their relationship, though, that first love, that romance to just be buttery, buttery smooth and sweet. I just wanted it to be Mallory's favorite candy is Smarties, just like a pack of Smarties, full of
Yeah.
sugar and sweetness. That's what I wanted, especially in the very beginning. And of course, it's not a book without drama, and there's drama in their relationship. But yeah, I wanted that to be reflected. Her first love, I thought that was really important.
Well, let's touch on that for a moment because you did this really interesting thing where the first half of the book we're being given challenges and they are perceived as negative by the outside world. I think this family deals with it very
Right.
beautifully, but it's just real life. They're
Right.
being given news at every stage that is challenging for them to accept.
Mhm.
And guess what? In the second half of the book, they're being given beautiful opportunities, something that they would have put on their Christmas list. Their daughter is a success by every measure
Right.
and
Yeah.
has love come into her life. And that is almost more challenging than all of the things in part
Yes.
one of the book. Scott thought he had a hard time with coming to
Exactly.
terms with you know, a
Yeah.
child having a different diagnosis, you thought that was hard? Guess what? When he
Right.
sees her talk to a boy for the first time and so
Yeah.
I'm highlighting this because it's it's very true to the experiences we have where sometimes we can deal with the hard things
Right.
almost easier than we can deal with the wonderful things because the wonderful things are terrifying for us.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
invited us into that experience and you bring us into this beautiful relationship that anyone would love for their teenage daughter. And guess
Right.
what? It's still really challenging because you are met with real life circumstances, changes, opportunities, challenges. You're also facing the preconceived notions of the outside world and
Yeah.
the pressures of even almost quote unquote woke people still having their beliefs about what someone else is capable of or should do or what a relationship should look like. So I'm dropping bombs without trying to give away the whole plot of the book, but this couple encounters real life challenges.
And and these real life challenges are adult problems.
Yes.
So, these are two kids that are 16 and 17 when they meet each other for the first time. They're still in high school. And, what Mallory has to deal with is some pretty adult stuff, pretty big feelings that, for anyone that's listening, the book introduces anxiety and depression, which is something that Mallory deals with on top of everything else. So, adults have a hard time processing depression and anxiety. So you add everything else into the mix, and now she has this new boyfriend who is nothing but supportive to her. Like he just adores her. He knows something's not right as the relationship progresses. He knows she's kind of off and she's not feeling like herself. And I wanted that support for her that was somebody other than her parents and her brother. So I thought that was really, really important. And I just, it was just, I really hope my daughter finds that. And every chapter I wrote from Caleb's point of view, I just really wanted that. I really hope my daughter finds that kind of love and support from a partner in life. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
everybody's family dynamic is different. Everybody's relationship is different. No matter who you love, no matter who you're with, everyone's is different. And, I hoped that came across on the page, I guess is what I'm trying to say, rambling as I'm saying it.
No, it really did, and I found so many parallels in their relationship, and I thought, "This is a relationship I wish I would have had as a young person,"
Yeah,
and absolutely didn't, and it was beautiful to see on the page, and I do wanna touch on the fact that Mallory is, like many people, not
right.
just navigating one thing, and that's something that I used to share a lot. There was a misconception. I'm gonna take a little side road and bring us back. I was also the director of a cancer support center. And I
Aw,
remember people would tell me like, "Oh my god, people are navigating cancer diagnosis." I'm like, "And guess what? They also have all of these other things. There are substance abuse issues, there's mental health issues. Some people
right,
have diabetes, some people are in the middle of a divorce, or they
right,
lost a child, or they were fired when they disclosed that they were diagnosed with some." So,
right.
it's not just that you have this one thing you experience, and then the whole world surrounds you with
Yeah,
pillows and marshmallows and puts you in a
right,
bubble where nothing else happens to you. So you're inviting us into this experience where someone is navigating multiple challenges at once, as we all do.
right,
And you're looking at it through this lens. And I thought that it was so raw and true,
aw, good.
and and I guess, I wanna say it right, but I'm gonna let go of that and just say that it
Just say,
was not right, just say it. We're just talking about this. It was not wrapped up in a neat little bow in 1 week.
no,
People had to go through their own layers and struggles, and
right,
another thing I wanna touch on, people are allowed to mature and grow. And that's
correct.
also something that sometimes we're not allowed to do in real
And
life.
it takes time. Like you
It
said,
takes
not a week, it
time.
takes years, decades even sometimes. It takes time. Yeah,
It does. So you were bringing us on that journey where we're being influenced by outside forces, we have real life decisions to make, and then at the heart of it, someone needs to be centered because they're in an acute experience of anxiety and depression, and it needs to be addressed. And it
right,
almost brings everything around it to a halt.
right,
And so we're in that moment, right, where our main character is navigating something and is given the grace to heal, to grow, to learn, to develop other skills, and is not punished for it. And I
right.
thought that was a really beautiful part of the story where, and it's a saying that I actually say to myself a lot to help myself in difficult moments. Time is a gift, not a threat. Meaning
That the
that,
truth.
isn't that the truth? And by the way,
Yeah,
I do wish somebody had said that to me as a young person. I'm in my mid-40s, and this is something I say to myself every day now to help. Time is a gift, not a threat. And that was very present in your storytelling, where Mallory's not punished for being young, for having a
no,
diagnosis, for having feelings she was not sure how to navigate and deal with. She's given grace. And that
yes.
grace can feel painful, right? Time, distance, space, all of these things. So I want to drop into that part of the book. The
Okay.
part that none of us would choose for ourselves, but is absolutely necessary for our growth and development. That hard part where we
Yeah,
surrender and we receive help. Why did
correct.
you choose that? Like, why was Mallory given that opportunity?
Well, because it happened in our life. We experienced that firsthand. Mallory enters a very dark after she meets Caleb and she's supposed to be happy. She says her internal dialogue in the book is, I've never been happier and sadder kind of at the same time. And that's, when you deal with depression, that's kind of how you feel sometimes. And that's what she dealt with. And, she enters this very dark period of her life without Caleb. And also her parents, this now they've kind of got outside help before, but now they need bigger outside help. This has now really exploded into a whole new territory that they have never entered into before. And she needs really tons of support. But I like what you had said where they never make her feel bad for that. And there's a scene with Jake and Mallory in particular in part 2 when Jake's older, and Mallory finally confesses to him that she feels like she's a burden. She feels like she's a burden to this family. And her parents and her family don't make her feel that way at all. They're doing everything in their power to get her the help she needs, but her mind's telling her something completely different. So that's something that she has to navigate. And I love the introduction, and this happened in our life, of equine therapy in the book to help her. Horses, and the Camelot Center that's mentioned in the book is that's where my daughter rides. That's the real name of the facility. So I wanted the Camelot Center to be in this book because they are incredible. And it's where my daughter has grown the most into the person she is today. And that's what I wanted for Mallory. So her parents recognized that they needed something different, and they needed something that was not just sitting down on a couch and talking to a therapist. They needed something
Yes.
different. And so they went this route, and it was the best decision for Mallory. So, and the amount of support she gets from her family with the equine therapy is wonderful. And that's what I wanted to. And I think that's the point in the book where Mallory just shoots for the stars, and she
Yeah.
just takes off and becomes her own person at that point. And that's why the book is 25 years of Mallory's life, because that's how long it took to get her to the place where she gets her happily ever after. And yeah, I wanted that to be reflected. So I'm getting a little choked up thinking about it.
No, it was very emotional as a reader because even if you cannot relate to Mallory's experience, which a lot of people cannot,
Right.
you can relate to pain bringing you almost to your knees, but also opening you up.
Right.
So when you think about it, she would not have been introduced to these things that
Right.
build out her life and reveal her passions
Yeah.
had she not had to have that moment of surrender. And I do think a lot of us can relate to that. And almost that shying away from cracking open can almost prevent you from
Yeah.
those moments where you do become the person you are. You learn about yourself. And I
Right.
do want to touch on the exposure to different forms of, and I'll use quotes around this too, therapy. I used to be a psychotherapist, and I am probably the most anti sit on a couch and talk to another person kind of person. And here's why. So, that nonprofit I was telling you about for kids with special needs, people would look at us all the time and say, why is what you're doing special? Like, why does that work?
Right.
Because we were pairing kids with other kids of similar ages and taking them into recreational activities, and
Aw.
you would watch people's lives open up. And I'm thinking about this very one specific thing, and I think you'll like hearing about this, which is the only reason I'm sharing it.
Sure.
We would take these kids, we had full calendars of events. I mean, it was wild the
Aw.
stuff we used to do, but one of the things we would do is we would take the kids cliff jumping in Malibu, which is
Oh my
something near us here, and you can look at that and be like, "You did what?" We would take them, we would rent a bus, take them on a hike, everyone would have a buddy, we would go through the whole thing of, like, prepping them for this, and then we would take them to the different tiers of the cliffs, which would drop into these beautiful natural water pools. And we would
goodness.
make a whole day of it. And everyone would like gather and cheer people on and da da da. Like we would make it this
That's
incredible
awesome.
experience. And then you would never think that that would be something that
Yeah.
opened someone up, but it did. And I'm not saying it has to replace all the other therapies that
No,
someone
not at
experienced, but
all.
it's this ancillary experience that introduces you to yourself. And I felt
Yes.
like that's what your book was doing. It was bringing all of the characters into an awareness of skills and capacity that they did
Yes.
not know that they had within them until these
Right.
moments, like, brought it out in them.
She gets introduced to a lot of different therapies. I wanted
Yeah.
that, like, music therapy, art therapy, which
Yes.
she's an artist, and there is a place for that couch therapy, so her family
Yes.
does that as well, and then there's the equine therapy. So, sometimes when you're in those situations, it is kind of like you're just throwing darts because you really don't know what's gonna stick or click with the person to really help, and maybe that couch therapy is that one thing. Great.
Yes. Mhm.
Wonderful. But yeah, you do have to find what works for you. And if that's jumping off a cliff in Malibu, that is amazing. I could totally do that. That's awesome. Like,
One of my favorite memories with the
I love
kids,
that.
definitely, definitely. The other one was and it was in Southern California, so we took advantage of what was
Yeah,
around us.
of
We did
course.
a
Of course.
surfing clinic. So we would get
Oh,
kids on
awesome.
a surfboard, and we would have a bunch of surfers in the water, so it would be like 6 surfers to 1 board
Yeah.
helping kids do this, and it was just a beautiful experience of, like, again, everyone in the dynamic
Right.
realizing something about themselves. So it's not just one person. And I
Right.
do want to make that clear. It's also the kids who are volunteering to do this
Yes. Yes.
realizing something about themselves as well and
Absolutely.
increasing their ability to empathize with someone who's having a completely different experience from
Yeah,
them.
because even like in the book when she's in the equine therapy, she meets Ben.
Yes.
So, and Ben has a lot of, kind of has some, it's easy for her to talk to Ben because he has a lot of similar mental health issues that she does. And that's something that my daughter has found when she goes to the Camelot Center is those people relate to her. She can
Yeah.
relate to a lot of them in a way that even though us as we love her as her family, we can't really relate on a personal level what she's going through. We support her, we love her, but we can't really relate. But yet when she goes to the Camelot Center, she finds people that she can relate to. And that I think is huge. And I wanted that in the book as well, that, Mallory has found her people.
Yeah.
these these are her people. And that's you need that. And whatever that entails, wherever that you find that, you need that. You have to have it.
So, Elaine, this might be kind of like a big or heavy question, but this was your first novel. What were
Yes.
you hoping when you wrote this?
My biggest thing I kept thinking the whole time I was writing it was if one person, whether it's someone that's like Mallory or someone that's like Laura, reads this book and feels seen and heard, I've done my job. Even if I don't sell one single copy, I've done my job. And something that is kind of like a theme throughout the book that Mallory is told a lot is that she's worthy. So I wanted people to read this book and that sentence, you are worthy. That's how I sign. When I sign these books, I put you are worthy and I sign it because everybody is worthy. And I wanted someone to read my book and feel that. One of my favorite reviews is from a reader who said that she was in a very similar situation to Laura and Scott when it comes to her son. And she felt like she was reading about her life. And I started crying. I was like, that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to read this book and feel like they weren't alone. That was so important to me.
What an incredible gift to give others, but also to give yourself as a writer to know that you're giving people that experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Elaine, I love that we've been able to discuss this book. I am so glad that I read it. But I do want to give you some time to tell us a little bit about your other work and things that are
Yeah, of
coming
course.
out.
Yes. So I'll start with the book I have coming out. That's going to be released February 24th. It's a romantic suspense, which is an entirely new genre for me. I'll explain why in a second, because this book, everything in this book, nothing personally is tied to me. So it was challenging for me to write. It really was. There were times when I wanted to throw my laptop out the window, like, what am I doing? But I am so incredibly happy with the end result. This book, I love it so much. It's a romantic suspense. It takes place in the Black Onyx Hotel. The main character is Rose, and her mother is missing. And she is paired with a detective who she had a past relationship with. So there's very much an enemies to lovers, lots of banter. and they have to work together to find her mother. So it's really fun. And now that I like dealing with time in my books. It's a thing with me. I'm discovering. So this book spans only a few hours, and each
Okay.
chapter is time stamped. So it's kind of fun in that way. Now, my other two books, so Becoming Mallory, I like to call this the Mallory universe. You have Becoming Mallory, His Last Shot, and All In. They all take place in the same universe. So they're standalones. It's not a series, but these chapters, the characters bleed into other stories. So we've been introduced to the characters in Becoming Mallory. There's a side character Becoming Mallory. His name is Johnny. That is Scott's cousin. It's his best friend and business partner. Johnny has a book called His Last Shot. That's actually my third book, and it's Johnny's story. It has rheumatoid arthritis representation. So he meets Rachel, and Rachel, it's an age gap as well. He's 45, she's 30, and she has rheumatoid arthritis. So she's very closed off because of that. She has a lot of walls built up. And Johnny is a professional pool player. So pool, billiards is huge in my family, huge in my life. My dad is a big pool player. My brother plays in leagues. It's just something that is ingrained in me. So that's why that book is kind of personal. I love that. My brother did artwork in the book. There's like a piece of art in the very beginning of the book. He painted that for me. He's an amazing artist as well. And then my second book is All In. That spans 27 years because, it's what I do. And that's actually loosely based on my coworker's love story. So after I wrote Mallory, I had no clue what my second book was going to be about. I knew I wanted to keep this author journey going, but I'm like, where do I go? And I'm sitting at lunch with her one day, and she proceeds to tell me the story of how she reconnected with her first love after a messy divorce. And I knew I had my second book. So with her and her partner's permission, that was their second story. So they break up as teenagers, stupid decision like we all make when we're teenagers. They stay in touch as friends through the years, through letters, emails, and text messages. Those are in the book. And when they come together later on in life, it doesn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. So like I said, like the bar that's in All In is in His Last Shot, and like a lot of the characters kind of bleed together. So yeah, and I'm currently writing my fifth. So I'm in this for the long haul.
Well, Elaine, I love that we've had the opportunity to meet you and learn about your characters and your writing style, and you really just shared so much with us. Now we're going to pivot to the part of the episode that I personally love, and it's me inviting my guests to write and read a love letter either to their readers or their younger selves. So I'd like to just give you the floor.
Okay, so mine is to my younger self. I debated on how to rate this, and I hope I don't cry when I read this. So it says, Dear Elaine, I know. You're probably squinting at this letter, wondering why I'm calling you Elaine instead of the name you're used to writing on the top of your homework. I know what you're doing right now. You're carefully choosing the best words for the poem you're so proud of, which, by the way, is going to be the best one you ever wrote. And the reason I'm calling you Elaine is because one day that poem you're writing on the wall next to your bed will change your life. You're lighting a match that will continue to burn in the back of your mind for decades to come. Right now, though, I know you don't feel very brave. You're second guessing yourself constantly. You shrink back when you should be standing tall. You look around the cafeteria at school, convinced everyone else has something you don't. So let me tell you something you desperately need to hear. There is nothing wrong with you. Not your voice, not your dreams, not your big feelings, not your imagination that's clawing its way out of you. You don't need to change who you are. Don't believe those voices in your head that tell you to be like everyone else. Trust me, that's the last thing you need. Because the girl I remember is enough. She's different, and different is special. It's unique, and it's pretty stinking cool. And that little spark you feel when you write, that pull towards stories, characters, and worlds that only exist inside your head, you'll take those ideas and scribble them in notebooks, and you'll hide them under your bed like secrets. That's not silly. That's your future life trying to introduce itself to you. Because here's the part that will sound impossible. You become a writer, and your pen name is Elaine. Those stories you were so scared to say out loud, you tell them. I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? So here's the thing. That imagination and creativity you sometimes wish would quiet down. You know what I mean, right? It's the one thing you love the most about yourself. But it's a quality that isn't considered cool or girly. So you push it down. Well, it's moving forward, and you really need to move with it. And that little voice that makes you feel scared and afraid, that's fear. throw it away. It's completely useless. Because you do remember that feeling you had in speech English in first period. Remember that during that semester in 10th grade? You wrote an amazing speech that the whole class stood and clapped for. For 5 minutes, you were fearless. You make sure to hang on to that boldness and pride you felt in yourself that day and take it with you through life. So I'm going to sign off with this. Throw away the doubts. Raise your hand. Share your ideas. Take up space. Stop apologizing for existing and being you, because you are far more capable than you know. Please, for the love of God, don't stop writing on walls. Love, Elaine. I'm sorry.
Elaine, how dare you make me cry so early in the morning?
Sorry, I know you're in California. It's really early over there.
Oh, that was so beautiful. And I really appreciate you being so generous with us, because I
Course.
know,
My
so,
pleasure.
so often I say this, people listening, I realize that was a letter to your younger self, but so many of us needed that letter. So thank you very,
I hope
very much.
you're very welcome.
And to anyone listening, I will make sure to put Elaine's contact information in the show notes, all the social media and where you can find her. And Elaine, I just really hope you join us again. This was such a beautiful
Oh my God.
interview. And
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this was amazing.
good. Oh, I love talking to you.
Oh, good.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, I hope so.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you are interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.